All right, I'm going to get us started since we're at the hour. Welcome, everyone. I'm Kyla Torre. I'm the Program Director for Digital Learning at the Coordinating Board, and you are here to learn about the technical assistance that OpenStax will be providing for the Coordinating Board's OER grant program. So before we get started, just a couple of things. Chat is enabled. We encourage you to chat, collaborate, talk amongst yourselves within the chat box. If you have any questions, I recommend that you use the Q&A feature instead. It'll help us to keep track of the questions and we make sure that everyone gets answered. We are recording this session and we'll send out the recording to all of the registrants after the fact. So you will get a recording and it will also be available on our website. There's also transcription available if you want to turn on that feature. So I'm going to start by introducing the OER grants that are open right now before I give it over to our OpenStax colleagues. So the current OER grants are for course development and implementation. They are funded by the GEAR funding, which comes out of the CARES Act, so it's federal funding. And basically they are matching grants for public and independent institutions for faculty teams who are either developing new or redesigning existing OER. And there are three focus points for this grant program. We're focusing on frequently transferred Texas core curriculum courses, co-requisite courses, and workforce courses in high-value fields. This grant is open now. We've actually gone through 2 rounds of awards already, or we will be announcing round 2 shortly, but the deadline for that has passed. However, we did extend the round 3 deadline for this grant to January 31st, so there's still plenty of time to apply. You can apply for the grant. All of the RFA, the application forms and all of that are available at the website that you see here, the www.highered.texas.gov/OER-GEAR. So you can find a lot more information there about that grant, about this grant, but I'll go over just a few of the basics. There are 2 types of projects under this grant: development grants and implementation grants. The development grants are the larger grants. They're up to $25,000, and they're for creating new OER within those 3 focus areas that I mentioned. Institutional collaboration is required for the development grants, so you must incorporate some form of collaboration with another institution, and that can look a few ways, and I'll explain that in just a minute. Those are matching grants. Of course, all of the grants are matching grants. The implementation grants are smaller. They're up to $5,000, and they're for implementing existing OER in your courses. For this, institutional collaboration is encouraged but not required, and so you can choose to work with another institution if you like. For all of the projects, the OER should be for online delivery. And for all of the projects, we're giving priority for high transfer Texas core curriculum courses and workforce education courses that lead to high value credentials. So again, you can get more information on that website and it'll go into more detail in the RFA about what that looks like. For these grants, we're offering some technical assistance with 3 partners. So OpenStax at Rice University is one of them, and they're the ones that you've come to here today. The Dana Center at the University of Texas at Austin is another, and they have a webinar tomorrow at 2 p.m. And Dallas College is our third, and they have a webinar this afternoon at 2 p.m. if you're interested in also attending any of those. So I'm just going to introduce our colleagues, and they're going at OpenStax, and they're going to talk about the sort of technical assistance that they are able to offer for this grant program. So we have with us today Anthony Palmiato, who's the editorial director at OpenStax, and Sonia Bennett-Brandt, who is the assistant director of institutional relations. And I am going to stop sharing so that you all can show your slides.
Thank you so much. So yeah, hi everyone. I'm Sonia. I'm going to start by sharing a presentation and basically doing sort of a quick introduction to what OpenStax does in case you're not familiar with our work. Talk a little bit about what's new with us, with our offerings and features, and then I'll hand it over to Anthony to talk in a little bit more detail about the technical assistance we'll be offering. So OpenStax is a mission-based organization. Our goal is to basically make learning work better for as many students as we can. We're part of Rice University, which is a nonprofit organization. So we're largely supported by philanthropic foundations. We also have partnerships with technology companies that help us support our library. And we do a couple of different things. So the biggest part of what we do is develop free open source textbooks, which we'll be talking a lot more about in a second. Our library currently has 41 books in it, but we also do some other things. So, 42. We develop, the library is growing faster than I can keep up with it. We also create some of our own homework technology that is low cost as possible, and we also do research into both cognitive science and learning science, and then also into OER outcomes. And then we do different types of advocacy work, both at the policy level, also working directly with institutions. That's actually the biggest part of my role, is working closely with specific schools to help them develop OER initiatives on their campuses. So I'll leave this up for a bit. This is our current library. We basically started with developing books for those really high enrollment intro courses. And then as our library has grown, we've been able to sort of work up into higher level courses, work down into high school courses. And that's what we're going to keep doing, basically keep expanding up and down, more high school textbooks and more higher level courses as well. Hopefully, reaching a point where we can cover entire degree programs and, have a situation where a student could have an open free textbook for their entire degree program. Here are some of our upcoming titles. I'll actually show these titles again later on, but we have some new books in the works. Then we also have Spanish translations of a bunch of our titles in the works, which we're really, really excited about. I know that's been something we've been wanting to do for a long time. And here's just a couple quick numbers to give you a sense of what our reach has been. So, we currently have 36,000 adopters, 14 million students using our books, over $1 billion in savings. I think our books are also being used in about 120 countries as well, which is exciting. And yeah, I want to talk a little bit about, sort of how our books are created. So they're put together in many ways through a process that's sort of comparable to the way a traditional textbook is put together. We hire authors, they write the book, then the book goes through a rigorous peer review process and a rigorous editorial process. The books cover the same sort of standard content that you would see in your traditional intro textbook. And we also do regular updates. So we do both regular updates that fix very minor issues in the textbook, like typos and things like that. And then we also release new editions when it's pedagogically necessary. So that'll differ from title to title. We'll probably be working on a new American government textbook in the nearish future, but for something like some of our math titles or our hard science titles, if the content isn't really evolving, then we're not going to put out a new edition unless it's necessary. And then we also have an open errata submission process. So if you find a mistake in one of our books, anyone can go to our errata submission form, let us know where the error is. And then we have an open list of what the submissions have been with an update on, whether we're in the process of fixing that issue, whether we reviewed it and sort of rejected that change, or whether that change has already been made. And our books are offered in a lot of different formats, which we found has really been huge in the last year. We've seen that individual students are using a bunch of different formats sort of throughout their study week. when they're moving from school to home where they might not have a reliable internet connection. So we have our web view version. We have a downloadable PDF, which again is great for anyone that may need to study in a place where they don't have a reliable internet connection. They can download that PDF in advance, then access it later. We sell low-cost print copies for students that really prefer reading a hard copy, which is sort of actually a significant percentage of students. We have a mobile app. We have Kindle versions and iBooks versions. So, our goal is to basically make it as easy as possible for students to study in the place that is the most convenient for them, even if that place sort of changes throughout the day as they're moving through different places and different situations. We also offer ancillary resources for each of our titles. So we sort of offer a different permutation of things for each book. If you're curious about a particular title, you can go to any book page and look at the Instructor Resources tab, and you'll see exactly what's offered for that particular title. But we'll have PowerPoint slides to help you get started on creating your lectures. We have LMS course cartridges. I believe we have Blackboard and Canvas cartridges for all of our titles. And then we have cartridges for some other LMSs as well that we're developing. Solutions manuals, of course, but also we often have additional test banks and test items and quiz banks, and a bunch of other stuff as well. It's also worth noting that we have a community hub on OER Commons. So we have a page for each book, and that's a place where instructors can post resources that they've created and share them. And you can go and either, sort of browse for things that you might want to use or share things that you've created. And that's a great place to find all sorts of different homework assignments or collections of articles that sort of align with the content and things like that. We also partner with technology providers. So I mentioned this briefly earlier, and we now have about 60 partners who offer sort of a whole variety of different online homework and courseware platforms. And again, you can see this from any individual book page, which partners align with that particular title. And we find that this is really useful for instructors that are using these kinds of online homework platforms and really kind of need them to be able to continue using something like this when they transfer to an OER textbook. And then we also have OpenStax Tutor, which is our own courseware. We've just released a bunch of new titles in OpenStax Tutor. So this is our current list. And basically what OpenStax Tutor is a reading comprehension and online homework tool where students can actually do their reading within OpenStax Tutor online. It's sort of broken up into these little digestible sections. And then after each section, there'll be questions to help them kind of cement their understanding. And then at the end of the chapter, there will be a whole homework assignment. And instructors can either just sort of use the pre-built homework assignment with questions within OpenStax Tutor or edit questions. We've actually just released, I think this is my next slide, maybe. Nope, it's not. Okay, well, we'll get to it. But we've just released the ability to add your own questions and edit existing questions, which I think I have a screenshot of in a bit. We also have released highlighting and note-taking in our WebView version of our books, which we're really excited about. There's been really high demand for that. And another cool thing about that, so students will make their highlights and make their notes, and then they can actually see a sort of study guide page that pulls all of their highlights and notes into a single page they can then download as a PDF and use as sort of an outline of the important concepts in the chapter. Another thing we're really excited about is releasing our books in customizable Google Docs versions. So people have edited our books, at sort of the granular text level in a bunch of different ways over the years. But I know it's something that we really wanted to make kind of more straightforward and easier and more accessible. And so we are in the process of releasing our whole library in Google Docs where it will be editable. I think we have 17 books available in Google Docs now, and the rest are on the way in the near future. And here we are. Here's the adding and editing question in OpenStax Tutor. So again, for every chapter, there will be a pre-built homework assignment that's ready to go. made up of questions that are in the textbook, questions that are just in OpenStax Tutor, and then personalized questions that are based on the student's performance. So basically the software can recognize if a student is struggling in a specific area, and then deliver them more questions in that area so that they can strengthen their skills on those concepts. And yeah, now you can either edit questions at the text level, add different answer options, or just write your questions entirely from scratch. And here again is just that list of upcoming titles that are on the way, as well as our Spanish translations. And finally, before I hand it over to Anthony, one thing we're doing as a part of this work is we're going to be hosting a series of webinars, basically sort of building off of our knowledge, both of creating books, also with our institutional work, where we work directly with schools to develop OER initiatives, with our work with our Creator Fest conference, where we sort of bring in instructors from around the country to develop OER materials together. And we're going to be hosting these 6 webinars in late January and early February. I think the first will be in the last week of January, and the rest will be in the first 2 weeks of February. And we're still pinning down the exact dates and times, but stay tuned for those. So yeah, basically covering a variety of topics about sort of OER advocacy and project management, and actually sort of creating content. So yeah, hope to see you in those. And with that, I will hand it over to Anthony.
Thanks so much, Sonia. That was great. And if anybody has any questions about anything Sonia said, I believe you can ask in either the chat or the Q&A, and we'll try to keep an eye on that. And then same thing goes for anything I share. I think one thing to point out before I run through this list and beyond is that many of the items that Sonia talked about potentially could be areas that are ripe for the customization type of work. For example, we're really excited, like Sonia said, about the Google Docs, and we hope that makes any customization of our books that maybe anybody had in mind or anybody's already doing or planning would be a lot easier to do in that platform than in either our older CX Connections platform, if you're familiar with it, which is a little bit of a technical platform, or transferring it to another arena. Something like a Google Docs is usually easier to develop. And that could go for the other elements too, even within tutor assessments. If you're creating an assessment program or something, potentially the edit capability makes that usable. So beyond sharing, some of the new stuff we're doing, some of that could be applicable, in this grant as well, if you're, so interested. In terms of the formal types of technical assistance we could provide, one thing, as Sonia pointed out, we do a lot of making books. And there's that process that we could work with you on and work with any of the grantees on and others. But there's different aspects to it. And, there's maybe only certain areas are where you would like to focus, or where you might need assistance. Maybe some elements actually creating the material or knowing exactly how you want to put it together. Maybe that's already covered, but there's other areas where OpenStax could help. So we're thinking about all the phases of courseware, course content, textbook, or other resource development, and thinking about the areas where we can help there. So, I won't read the slide to you, but basically, there's elements around setting up a project, understanding what needs to go into it from a development point of view, a collaborative point of view, team, and what we are actually going to develop. And then the development process itself, there's a good amount of OER out there. Of course, we're OpenStax. We have there's a lot of other resources out there, and there could be opportunities to analyze, reuse, reframe, remix, any of those R's or other R's, to create and improve on OER that's out there and incorporate it into your project. And while a lot of our material at OpenStax is made, often from scratch to fill gaps that where course materials don't exist, we have a lot of experience working with faculty and even working, to help develop our materials or our supportive materials around curating, improving, enhancing other existing OER out there. And since we're not the only ones like this, but since we work with a lot of colleges and other organizations around the country, there's a really good chance that while your idea is probably original and suits your specific needs, there may be similar needs elsewhere that we've been asked about, that we know people are working on, and we might be able to help pull from that. And then obviously the production side, this can get very work intensive. It can get technical. There's elements that everybody needs to consider regarding accessibility, creation of images, what type of art and illustrations you can use, multimedia development, and so on. So those are some of the areas of technical assistance that we could provide. Those are sort of smaller examples within the larger framework. And then, moving on to some examples, just so we've worked very closely with a number of institutions, specifically within Texas. It's probably, the state with which we've worked most closely with regarding individual schools undertaking projects. Even some of the ones Sonia mentioned, the translation project we have underway. We're doing it ourselves, but with a significant amount of support from faculty at UT Rio Grande Valley, who are helping us and who are doing some of their own translations and so on. And there's other projects like that as well. On the screen, you can't really see them, but there's a couple of, on the left is an example of somebody who created a co-requisite version of our college algebra book. This is at UT San Antonio. They worked within our system, added a bunch of material to it, curated others, added their own material, and then realigned it so that the co-requisite material was supportive within within that course context, and the way they taught it. And we know that co-recs are very, very different, in different schools approach them in a unique way, depending on the needs. And of course, with the Dana Center also available as a technical assistance partner, you have great amount of expertise there that you'll be able to access. And then, and another example is on the right-hand side, Texas A&M, we partnered with the bio department where, they created a significant amount of new images for our biology book, greatly improving the ones we had in there. They sort of picked the ones that needed the most help and that could benefit from their expertise. And then they used a combination of in-house and professional graphic artists to create a whole new suite of images that are actually used in a version of the book for them, but they've released all those images out to OpenStax and could be used in the community as well, so that it could go out to be used more widely. So those are just a couple of examples, and we work on these relatively often, and that's the type of thing we'd love to work on with any of the the grantees and others. Some other examples, just to put some things into what we've been thinking about, and of course we'd love to see what comes through on the applications. But when we create any textbook for this first bullet, adding or adjusting material, we consider the Texas curricula as much as we can. Of course, we're making a book for the whole country, but we always look to what's in the Texas course descriptions, if it's a course that's represented, which it usually is, and what the needs are. And then, of course, as we work with other states, other colleges, and the authors and reviewers from all around the country, sometimes that moves to be, a more generalized approach. It's usually in the ballpark, but of course, as our book might not suit the exact Texas curriculum perfectly, so that type of change is certainly warranted and often needed, and quite often done. I think there's been a lot of customizations around making our material more Texas specific. And then other materials, creation of lab manuals and worksheets and other resources. We've really focused a lot lately, especially since about March 15th of last year, on multimedia development, supporting those who are making resources to help instructors teach online or students learn online. And that goes from videos to video guides to assessments around multimedia materials, usage of data sources from the government and other activities, other materials from which activities could be created, and so on. So these types of things, assessments, translations, as we've mentioned a couple of times, and then the image and images and other multimedia are important. And then on the terms of inclusive design and development, that really covers a wide array of topics, anything from helping to create accessible resources, those that are compliant with accessibility guidelines for those students needing support and assistive devices. We've done a lot, and we still have a lot more to do and a lot more to learn. But we've tried to turn our attention working closely with a lot of faculty and experts around building equity, diversity and representation directly into the course material to make sure that not only is it properly representative of diverse populations and that it represents all of the students who could be taking it, but what is it doing to drive equity conversations, help students work with each other, develop cultural competency, and so on. And that's always, of course, we see that as a journey that we're all working on together. So we have some areas where we focused on. Like I said, we're always learning more, and we'd love to collaborate on those types of things as well. In terms of, we could move next. Yeah. So this, you can't really see these, but just as we're thinking about that process, we just like to mention that sometimes it's not about what we can do at OpenStax, what our team or our the partners we work with can do, but what we can provide in terms of documents, review instruments. We've done a good amount of instructional design, course design, developing survey materials, especially with that research group that Sonia mentioned, to understand what is needed in a course, what is needed among students, challenges students are facing, and also, since, if I understand correctly, the way that the collaborations between institutions may work, how to get that buy-in, and also understanding the needs from diverse institutions in that process. So we've done a lot of that, and we would love to, support anybody. These resources are available. We could provide them to anybody, but especially for those who we'd be collaborating with. Glad to provide that as part of the assistance. And then for a couple of more examples, we also have resources that I mentioned that inclusive design and move to the next slide, sorry. Yeah, so on things like that inclusive design and diversity, equity, and inclusion reviewing and development, we've tried to make it as, if I can use this word, systematic as possible. It's one thing to say, okay, well, we know we need to have this focus, but how does that render itself in every chapter or in every course? How does it in every course objective or learning outcome that you're meeting? How do you affect and impact students in the right way in all of those cases? So we've done chapter by chapter development, detailed reviews on every image, every historical figure that's mentioned in a field, every terminology, every example name, the examples themselves, those types of things. And that stuff, again, we're always evolving it, but we've done some of that work already, so we'd love to share some of that if needed. And then on items like sourcing and licensing, ensuring that the material that you're using or planning to use is open for use, working with different types of source checkers. We work closely with Creative Commons to sort of understand if there's any wiggle room around different types of usage and so on, and we'd be glad to bring even our own or their expertise to bear as needed. Those are just some examples of things we wanted to share in case you might not have thought that we could provide that as assistance, but we certainly can. And then of course, you know, the material development, working with you on that, production and so on are also obviously areas we'd love to help with. In terms of, yeah, I think that's all we had to present. And I believe we have, I'm going to be so bold here as to just kind of look in the chat. I'll answer one question that I see here about the transitioning to Google Docs. So like I think Sonia said, that we have about 17 of the books in there now. The rest are going in every couple of weeks. You know, we do a few more. The process of incorporating them into Google Docs involves a lot of, there's a technical conversion, and then we have to do a check to make sure that everything stayed in the same place, that nothing was misrendered, and especially in areas where there's a lot of math or other symbolism or a lot of formatting, tables and columns and things like that. We have to make sure that nothing got misaligned or anything like that. So I think by but this spring we'll have almost all of them in there. In terms of the link to the Google Doc, Sonia, you might be able to help me there. I'm not sure.
Yes. So basically, I think the way it's working right now is that you can go to any one of our book pages that has a Google Doc version available, and there will be a place where you can basically sign up to get access to that Google Doc. So you'll just put in your email, and I think you'll put in just a quick overview of what you're interested in editing, and then you'll pick out the modules that you want to edit, and then it will build the Google Doc for you. So I can grab that list of exactly which ones are available right now and put that in the chat. Hold on, I'm going to stop sharing for a second.
Sure. Yeah, and one thing about that is, so just to be clear, it's not one Google Doc, you know, for the whole country. It's right. Everybody gets their own. That's why we have to do that administrative task.
Exactly.
So school or whoever is customizing it does it on their own. Now, if you wanted to share that back out to the community, of course, we welcome it. But you would be working on your own sort of copy of the Google Doc so that you can keep it for yourselves. Okay. I see a question in the Q&A, but it is not for us.
I think if there are other questions for you all, I think we can take those now, before we get into more about the grant. Either in the chat or in the Q&A, you can put in any other questions that you have for OpenStax about the sort of assistance that they are able to provide, or certainly any of the work that they mentioned, which is all really amazing.
Well, and while you're collecting your thoughts, so definitely want to echo Jackie's sentiment in the chat from Texas Women's University about how this was very informative. And it really started answering a lot of questions that you may be having. One of the key things that we want you to know is, if you are even considering jumping into OER or trying to apply for an implementation and development grant, you're not alone in this process. And that's the key thing we want you to take away from this session, is there are partners out there that will work with you on development of ideas. I mean, you saw the long list of services that OpenStax can provide. We do have some additional technology assistance partners, but we're really trying to promote the idea of OER. So even if you have the questions that are going on in your mind right now, if I wonder if this is suitable for me, I wonder if this really matches where I want to take my course. As you can see, there are a plethora of resources out there for you. You are not going to be navigating this path by yourself. We have the expertise in place to be able to walk you through it. So we encourage this time, if you have any burning questions that you want to get answered, even from your colleagues within the chat. I mean, we can already see some people that have similar disciplines. You can also do consortiums. Remember, there's that piece of the grant. So maybe you can meet someone today that'll venture off and do a grant application with you, and we have a next textbook just waiting to happen. So make sure that you ask your questions now so that we can help you further along your application process.
So we have a few questions in the Q&A for you all.
I think I could start in on some of these, if that's okay. Sonia, obviously, in terms of editorial assistance, yes, I think as part of the technical assistance process, we could certainly bring in proofreading support, that type of a proofreading, copy editing, maybe development editing. And to be clear, sometimes that would be in-house personnel, sometimes that would be some of the other partners we work with, but I think it's all within the purview. And it would be a matter of what's needed and so on. But yes, I think we could help with that. And other editorial areas, that peer review that Sonia mentioned, that are the peer review process. I mean, our structure of creating textbooks and our authors are outstanding, and many of our authors are from Texas. The peer review process is what really makes the books work, because we get all that feedback ahead of time, and we know, okay, this isn't meeting my needs. No, you got to add this. This isn't clear. It won't be clear to my students. That sort of feedback that we get, we try to make it very candid. That's an area we can help with as well. But yes, in terms of proofreading, certainly. In terms of the page visit analytics, maybe I'll start this off, Sonia, and you can, it really would depend on where you would put that material. If it's, I don't think that we're able to provide that data for, depending on where you host it. But what I think is that with our experience doing that type of work, we could probably collaborate on a way to tell you who to work with or where you can post. Sonia, this is probably more your.
And I was pretty much about to say the same exact thing.
But yeah, so I don't know if we could provide that data directly, but I think we could collaborate and find out some ways to host. We know that that's important, and we're doing on our end things like trying to match up, engagement, student engagement with who's downloading and what formats they're using. We use that to make decisions on where we prioritize some efforts and stuff, so we know how important it is.
I'll just jump in and say that all of the grantees will be required to put the materials that they use on the OER text site, which is the Texas OER repository. And you, as an author, will get some basic information about how many people save your resource and things like that. But I think in moving forward, we at the coordinating board get some more detailed analytics than that, and we could figure out a way to work with grantees to get those analytics.
Cool. And quick side note, I put the list of the books we currently have in Google Docs into the chat, and it was formatted weirdly. So I sent it again, and then it was still formatted weirdly, but you'll get the idea. So for any of those titles in that list, if you go to the Instructor Resources tab, you'll see a box where you can get access to the Google Doc.
So we have a question about peer review, the peer review process.
Sure, I think I can dig into that one. So yes, they are every faculty member for every reviewer for each specific book or related project is a faculty member from that discipline, and as much as possible teaching that course. You mentioned the capital E expert. Sometimes the need for expertise actually overrides, are they teaching the course? And we actually have usually a couple of layers of review. We actually have a layer called expert review, where if it's a very specific topic and we really need some expertise and they don't teach that course, that's okay, because they're providing that expertise on whatever the issue is, human resources in a management book or so on. In other courses, it's, although some disciplines have specializations, almost any math professor could probably review a chapter of a college algebra book from an expertise perspective. So in that case, do you teach the course, do you have an advanced degree in that discipline is sort of the most important thing. So the factors are slightly different, but they're from the field, and almost always teaching the course. Psychology professors review psychology books, and political science and American government professors review American government books, and so on. In terms of how many reviewers overall, when we develop our books originally, usually it's somewhere between about 30 and 50. Sometimes it's a little less, sometimes it's a lot more. It does depend on the book. Sometimes the longer books, some of our books that represent 2-semester courses are quite long, and they have more reviewers. So we can get a number of, maybe we get 4 or 5 reviewers, maybe more on a chapter, and that adds up. I think Professor Trufant has a question about the hosting. Okay.
Yes. Yes. So as part of the grant, if you are an awardee of the grant, it's expected that you will host your resources within the OER text site, or make them available within the OER text site. So either creating them within or linking them to where they're hosted elsewhere, but they should be available to students and faculty across Texas, and across the United States with the OER text site. Are there any other questions specifically for OpenStax? Or I can get into a little bit. I'm sure you're all wondering, how do I ask for this technical assistance? How do I get this technical assistance? So I can get into a little bit of that if there are no other questions right now. And I'll answer the questions that are in the Q&A about the grant specifically in just a moment. So let me share my screen again. Okay, so I just want to say that, of course, we're offering this technical assistance. Our technical assistance partners aren't the only place that you can get technical assistance, although we encourage you to ask for, it in your applications, and I'll get into that process in a moment. But if you're looking for support on your campus, there are a number of places that you can go. Often there's an OER task force or office or position within a campus or district. You can go to your library. Librarians are a great place to ask for assistance in your application and on the process. Often your digital learning office or instructional designers or Center for Faculty Development will have some sort of OER training as well. And so that's some other places that you can go look for help while you're doing your application, and then while you're going through your project if you're an awardee. So how do you get support from our technical assistance partners? Basically, what you're going to do is specify within your application, which would be due by January 31st, that you would like to partner with a particular technical assistance partner, OpenStax, for instance, and what sort of technical assistance you're looking for. If you're awarded as a grantee, once we go through the review process and all of that, we will sort of match you on the back end with a technical assistance provider based on what you requested within your application. So your job as a grantee or as an applicant is to really decide which technical assistance partner is right for you and the work that you are trying to do, and then what specific types of assistance are you looking for within that grant. If you have questions that come to you, after this, or if you want to know more about the grant, there is the oer@highered.texas.gov website or email that you can ask any questions that you'd like, and I'll answer some more questions about the grant too after this. And if you're interested in the OER text repository, which is a good place to start when you're looking for OER, it's full of OER, particularly for lower division courses, although there's a wide variety in there now. And it is focused on OER that's most used in Texas or has been created by Texas faculty. And so it's a great place to start when you're looking for OER for this grant program. So those are just some some websites that are useful to you: the OER text repository, the website for the grant program where you can find the RFA, the inquiry email for the grant program, and then my email is there as well if you want to email me directly. And I can answer some questions about the grant program specifically. So let me get out of this so we can all see each other. So as far as the timeline for requesting technical assistance, you would, as I said, you would request with your application. So you'll have to request technical assistance by January 31st with your full application. And you'll specify in there who you want to work with and what exactly you're looking for in terms of assistance. The other question that we have about the grant specifically right now is that the grant period will end August 31st of 2022. So the requirements, if you do receive a grant, are to gather or create the OER that you're going to be using, and then teach the course twice within the grant period. So, which means that fall 2020 would not work as one of those teaching times within the grant period. But I would put that in your application and your timeline, and we would I would look at it, and it's a possibility. I don't know. I'd have to see like the full timeline of your application in order to be able to answer that question more specifically. But if it's the only time that you're teaching in fall 2022, then that would not be part of the grant period and probably not within the requirements. Okay. Do we have other questions about the grant or for OpenStax? I think the websites for the OER grant program info and for the repository were put in the chat, so you can click there if you want to take a closer look at either of those right now. And also the OER direct email for the grant program is in the chat. Well, so we do have two other technical assistance partners. That would be the Dana Center out of UT Austin and Dallas College. And they both have webinars coming up too. So I encourage you to go to all three webinars and decide what is right for you and the project that you're working on. The Dallas College webinar is at 2 p.m. today, and the Dana College or the Dana Center webinar is at 2 p.m. tomorrow. So please, attend all of them and decide what's best for you. But I want to thank my colleagues from OpenStax. I think this was a very helpful webinar for all of us to see just what you all are offering, and also to learn about the great work that you've been doing. And it's really, really impressive to see all the projects that you're working on. You must be exhausted. But it's wonderful work, and we're really happy to be partnering with you on this.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know we're really excited as well.
Very glad to be part of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, if there are no other questions right now, again, please feel free to email the grant email oer@highered.texas.gov, or you can email me directly and ask any questions. If anything comes up after the webinar and you're like, why didn't I ask that? There's still time. Please take a look at the grant website, read through the RFA. You still have time. The final deadline is January 31st, so we're looking forward to getting a lot of applications for that deadline. And again, thank you to OpenStax, and thank you all for coming. Yeah, hopefully we'll see you at the next two.